Carson, Leno, Fallon. Now, it's Wine Talks with Paul K.
Hey, welcome to Wine Talks with Paul K. And we are in an away game in beautiful downtown Yerevan, about to have a conversation with James Tufenkian. Introductions in just a moment. Wine Talks, this episode is sponsored by Total Wine and More, where you love what you find and find what you love. Distilled spirits not available in Virginia or New Hampshire. Must be 21 or older to buy. Wine Talks, of course, available on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Pandora, wherever you hang out for podcasting. And I was going to say sponsored by the original Wine of the Month Club, but that's no longer the case because I sold it. But we're here to have a fabulous conversation with a relative, with a mover and shaker of the Armenian world. He's a hotelier. He is a carpet manufacturer. I don't even know what else. He plants trees. And he now is getting into the wine business, so we thought we'd have a conversation with cousin James Tufenkian. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Paul.
This is great. This is fabulous. We already had a great conversation already to be here, but you've done so much for the community. But catching up, you're born in L.A., went to law school in New York, dated my sister. I mean, what else? What else could there be?
That could have been the first point on my resume.
Yeah,
dated
right.
Paul's sister. I'm very proud.
I appreciate that. I'll let her know. But you were. What's fascinating to me about your story, and of course, Greg, my brother-in-law, keeps us posted. You are the second cousin to my father-in-law. Is that accurate?
Something like that.
Something
yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Your father and my father-in-law were first cousins. No, his father. Did I screw
His
up already?
father. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Ralph's father was my father's first cousin.
Okay, this is bizarre. I'll tell you why it's bizarre. I just told the story to Connor. Sandra and I get engaged. We're at the Turfenkian household. I walk down the hallway to her bedroom, and this gentleman comes out of the bathroom, and he's a spitting image of my mom's father. Spitting image. I'm like freaking out. Like, is he reincarnated? His name was Harry Denalian.
Huh.
Okay? Now, he's married to Ralph's sister, Marion.
Okay.
So I look at Sandra, I go, who is this guy? She goes, that's Harry Denalian. What do you mean Denalian? That's my father, that's my mom's maiden name. Well, they were first cousins.
No kidding.
Yeah. So when we were going through photographs when Marion passed away a couple of years ago, there's my grandfather and this guy Harry hanging out at some event. I don't know what they were doing. There's all kinds of pictures of them together. So now I call Sandra cousin. Cuz, as it were. Which is a little scary. But anyway. So you said you were in law school in New York. Were you chasing law to do justice or to?
Yeah, it was kind of a justice mission. I mean, how I ended up in New York is kind of interesting for this context because I actually grew up knowing nothing about being Armenian. I didn't know about the genocide until I happened on a book about it in the library in college in Oregon. And when I learned about it, something in me just turned around and I said, I've got to become Armenian. So when I applied to law school, I only applied in New York because I thought, and I also wanted to be in New York, but I thought that's a place to connect with Armenians. And that's really what I wanted to do. So, yeah.
So that's just right there, really interesting. I grew up, my dad was, very cultural, but America was an important part of his culture as well, but certainly very familiar with the genocide. My grandparents fled, both sides. But you read a book that piques some interest, and obviously Oregon. I knew David a little bit. We shared wine together a little bit. Do you remember what it was that this tragedy or this suppression or oppression that triggered an interest in this? Or
well, I think my whole family, for some reason, and you can't really see it in my parents, but my brother and sister and I all were very justice-oriented. I think my mom had a strong streak of that, and just the injustice of the genocide, besides the horror, I mean. Yeah, it just was something, and that was my history. And I think at some point I realized that, if I didn't kind of turn around and become Armenian, I was actually participating in the genocide by dissolving into American society. And
Wow,
I was like the next generation of the Turks eliminating us as a race, and I wasn't going to be a part of that.
That's very interesting. So why do you think in your household you were, I mean, my father spoke 5 languages. I had to learn my second language I had to learn on my own, which he spoke. But how is it that you don't think that your parents were indoctrinated that way?
I think they were just too focused on making it in America, you know? Yeah. And maybe it was that time. They were politically kind of conservative. We were always very deeply Christian, Protestant Christian, and that was kind of their channel for their energies, all of that.
I think that generation was like that. I mean, they came to America, they saw the opportunities. They felt like they owed my dad clearly in 1949 when he came here felt like he owed America, USC in particular, something because they gave him a life.
Yep.
And maybe that's what it is. But they would never forget the genocide. So what happened with that one? What did you do with this information?
The information about the genocide.
Yeah, like you
I moved
turned
to
the
New
corner.
York.
Like, I'm going to move to New York, and I'm going to become an Armenian.
Yeah. So I first big move was I joined the Areni dance group in New York while I was going to law school.
It says no one ever. But go ahead.
And yeah. And there, I mean, that opened up a whole world of Armenians. I mean, it was around the time that Beirut was in major civil war, and so the group consisted of Armenians from all these exotic places that I had dreamed about. You know, places like Beirut and Aleppo and Cairo and. So it was just, I mean, for me, a white bread kid from actually Oregon more than California, it was like just opening a door to the world.
Wow.
It was so exciting for me.
So did you recognize the differences of the location, like the Beirutis having their tendencies?
They were lunatics. That's what I remember. Yeah, very big differences.
Okay, that's very funny.
And also the second generation Armenians like me, there were a few of us from California, and like we were just in a totally different world too. I mean, but it was so great being together and just feeling this sense of kind of brotherhood and sisterhood with Armenians from everywhere.
So how old do you think you were then?
How old?
Yeah.
Early 20s.
Because I went to the Armenian Assembly internship in Washington, D.C., and look, my mom would threaten me with sending me to Camp Kessob if I didn't behave. I mean, literally, she would do that.
The worst thing she could do to you.
Exactly. She'd put on my place at the dinner table saying, if you don't behave, she'd circle the ad. And so I didn't know about Armenians until I got to Washington, D.C., and opened a whole world. I went to dinner with my friend, one of my best friends, Greg Felikian, right now. Learned about Rusahais and all that stuff. I think that root culture stuff it kind of triggers a little bit. You kind of feel a little nostalgic. You kind of feel like what's going on. So, but how did you end up here then? I mean, there's a huge chasm between joining the Areni dance group and, developing in Armenia.
Right. Well, the story starts in 1981. I came here on a Columbia University sponsored student trip. And a few of my friends came along, and we spent 10 days in Armenia and fell totally in love with the place. And on the last day of the trip, we're sitting around on the steps of one of the ministries, and somebody said, so if Armenia ever became free, I mean, not like it's ever going to happen or it's any way it's possible, but like, would you come back? And we basically all said, well, yeah, of course we would. It would be the opportunity of a lifetime, 1,000 years with no country, and we have to come back. So then came independence and the Artsakh War, and I was sitting comfortably in my nice apartment in New York with my new successful business and just couldn't sleep nights thinking that I was not a part of this big struggle that was going on. I mean, it looked like a next genocide at that time, and I wasn't going to sit on the sidelines. So
you were making carpets at that point.
Yeah, and that's key, actually, because, everybody knew at that point, this was probably in 93, that what Armenia needed more than anything was employment. There was like no economy here. Everything had collapsed. It was total chaos, and they needed employment. And some years before, I'd already set up a carpet production in Nepal with some Tibetan partners, and that was the basis of my business. And I looked at Armenia and I said, there's no reason I couldn't do the same thing there. So, before I came, everybody is telling me it's an impossible place to work. There's corruption and chaos. And if you happen to be successful, the mafia will edge in on your business. And I just said, I don't care. I'm going. So I came here to start up a carpet business.
That is fascinating. We got to go back to, because you said you had a successful carpet business in Nepal, and now they're actually trying to grow grapes in certain parts of India. But there's this kind of a jump there. You were in law school, and now you're making carpets, which is a huge undertaking in a country that had, probably less resources than expected. So what? Let's just tell me about that for a second.
The transition from law to carpets?
Yeah.
Simply
says no one ever again.
Third year of law school, I had worked a couple summers for law firms, and I looked in the mirror one day and I said, dude, these are the best years of your life. There is no way you're going to dress up in a suit and chain yourself to a desk for 12 hours every day.
Wow.
And I said, I gotta find another way. And I'd been buying and selling carpets to pay my way through law school. I knew a little bit about it because of some previous experience. And I had this idea about making the first 21st century modern Oriental rug business. The industry hadn't changed in 500 years, And so I had this idea, and I thought if I was successful at it, I could work it for 3 or 4 years, build it up and sell it off, and then just spend the rest of my life doing good things for the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So
you had a lot of self-talk going on in your younger days, right? I mean,
I did. I haven't given you the half of it.
Yeah,
right.
Looking at life and saying, this isn't for me, and I certainly can understand the law side of it, but not wanting to do that work, but then to create an industry out of nothing is, huge. And then you come to Armenia to do the same, and this is after freedom, 1991.
Yeah, it's 93, so the war was still going on. I came here in September of 93 for the first time. Went straight to the AUA. I figured the only way I could avoid the corruption was to try and get some young people who had somehow been indoctrinated in Western thinking. So I went and put up a job posting like the first day I got here at AUA for a manager to help me develop this carpet business in Armenia. And I ended up hiring a graduate from the first MBA class from AUA. And then, by the way, my hotel business is based on, I started out with 4 MBA graduates from AUA. So I have a big debt to AUA.
That's huge. A huge debt to them. But this is, I think this is a challenge even today. We came here in 2006. I mean, it was a completely different part of Yerevan was not the same. And you were there now in 1993, and it's even less.
The same.
Yeah, less going on. But finding an indoctrinated, I think isn't that one of the struggles today with Armenia's political system, is getting kids indoctrinated to the Western thinking so that they're not just hogtied to the traditional methodologies?
I think you don't even have to work at it anymore. I mean, people ask me, because I say it's a completely different environment here than it was 30 years ago. And a good part of that is because of the government, which, despite all its shortcomings, has made a tremendous change in the country.
Really?
Yeah, I always have to give them credit. I can talk for hours about their shortcomings, but the world here in Armenia is completely different than it was 5 years ago. And so going back to the youth, a big part of the change in Armenia was that, but an even bigger part is just that as the Soviet era died off and is fading out, those people, the young people have somehow grown up very pure and very Western thinking and just a whole different kind of human being,
That's interesting because, yes, I think if you talk to people in diaspora, they're going to tell you about the shortcomings of the government. Of course, there's the classic Armenian arguments going on. But when we drove to the monastery yesterday, the day before, my comment and my question to Sandra was, are you more inspired to come and help, or are you more resolved the fact that they can't help themselves? And you're saying, yeah, they can help themselves.
Oh, no doubt about it.
And they're doing a lot here. But this infrastructure of just this street alone, where's that infrastructure coming from? Is it the diaspora money? Is it the Russian money? Why did this happen?
This street?
Yes.
Well,
downtown Yerevan in general.
I don't want to go too deep into it, but let's say there was a lot of local rich people and Russian rich people that provided the funding.
But that's not enough to sustain it. The lifestyle has to be adopted. People have to want to be able to do this.
Oh, yeah. No, the economy is, developing into being very broad-based and just red hot, too. Yeah.
And so then the idea for hotels came about after the carpets were kind of going. You thought we need Western-style hotels, which weren't really around. Savi owned the Areni Hotel for a while, but that really wasn't, Western style.
Yeah, the normal thing to do would have been to build a hotel in Yerevan, which I eventually did. But the idea, which was started in 1999, was to build hotels in the regions because at that time people were still following the old Soviet model. They come to Armenia to visit and they'd sit in Yerevan and take exhausting day trips to the countryside and come back to Yerevan at night, and they weren't getting to experience really the joys, the culture, the flavor of the countryside. So I really wanted to help open up the regions for tourism by starting regional hotels. And then eventually built this one in Yerevan by Vernissage.
And what does that brand stand for? What is the Tufenkian brand philosophy? What does it mean? Like if I go to Europe, I'm going to go to the Sofotels, or I'm going to go to whatever chain. What does the Tufenkian chain represent?
I think first of all, it's always integrating the culture and history into modernity. So if you see the design of my hotels, they're very traditional and very modern at the same time, and I think tastefully so. It's easy to do that badly, and I think we've avoided that. And also, it's about service. When we first started, I came to my team and I said, "Look, guys, this idea of hospitality, this is built into Armenian culture, All of you know what it's like to have a guest in your home and how you treat them. The idea here is that you just take that feeling and convey it to the guests in our hotels." And it's been the guiding philosophy for 23 years, and it really is embedded in the staff, the management, all the way through.
That is amazingly simple, but amazingly brilliant at the same time. Because, some of our friends, they wanted to go visit their ancestors' villages. I forgot the name now, but they went yesterday, and they're literally talking to people on the street saying, "I'm a cousin of," and they're into the house. And before you know it, there's a full spread.
That's right, exactly.
And you
forget about the rest of the day.
Yeah. It takes a whole. That was the other. But you commercialize this idea because hospitality probably wasn't the greatest asset to the leftover Soviet worker, right?
Yeah, I think actually I never thought about it, but I think you could say there was they were one person at home and they were another person at work, typically, right. And I tried to bring the home mentality into the work.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Seems to be working.
Yeah, I think so. Guests seem to like it.
So last night we went to, I had this morning on the podcast, I had Miriam, what was it, Shehalagian? Anyway, she runs the In Vino wine bar.
Yeah.
And, Saga Italiana. And I see a bottle of Turfenkian wine there. And, being in the diaspora and being in the wine business for 35 years, I was a little reluctant to embrace the Armenian wine industry, frankly. We know it takes generations, it takes multiple vintages to figure out what's going on in the soil, but kind of interesting to see your brand here. So what's the thought process behind venturing into the wine world?
Part of it was just I always have loved farming and the idea of growing stuff. And I think partly also discovering the deep history of wine in Armenia attracted it to me. That paired with my tourism business means that it was a sphere I had to get into. And then once I started, I just got totally hooked.
Yeah.
It's funny, I have to tell you this, you've probably heard stories like this before. A few months ago, we were finally putting together like a 5-year budget for the business. And I was seeing, based on the production that we were planning on, how much investment it was going to take. And I walked out of that meeting just crushed. I was like,
yeah, that's an old story.
Are you kidding? Well, so then later in the afternoon, I have a second meeting about wine where we're tasting the wines that we just made our first production from our vineyards this year. And I tasted the wines. I got so excited. I totally forgot the pain of the investment. And I keep analogizing it to what I understand happens to women when they give birth. Like it's extremely painful and they hold the baby for 5 minutes and suddenly they forget all the pain.
Wow.
And that's exactly what it's like. And
Wow.
it just keeps, it is irresistible. It grabs hold of you. So... And we also the conditions here are so good for making wine.
Yeah.
I mean, we have French partners from Alsace advising us on everything, and they got attracted to Armenia because of the unique conditions, and also because very particularly with global warming, the whole wine world is in panic about what's going to happen as climate changes. And here, you come to Armenia, and somebody told me like the highest vineyards in Europe are in Italy at like 450 meters or something.
Yeah, right.
And you come to Armenia, and our base is 1,000 meters,
Right.
and then our vineyards are at 12 to 1,300. So these guys are looking at it and saying, this is the place of the future for wine. So all of that, I mean, it just seemed like a great place to put more money than you ever wanted to put into it.
Spend more money. The old adage of the wine business. But I think it's a fascinating concept, and you just said it, which is the future of the wine business, but it's also been the freaking historical part of the wine business. And you're building a hotel near Areni Cave, and it even goes further back than that.
Yeah.
I was trying to pigeonhole the concept. You talk about the New World, Australia, New Zealand, America, South America. You call them New World wines, and they have certain privileges because of that, because they can do whatever they want. The French will come to California and say, wow, I get to grow whatever I want, whenever I want. I don't have to worry about,
Right.
my local traditions. And here in Armenia, is it New World or Old World here? It's New World in that it's kind of starting from scratch because the Soviets interrupted it all, but it's Old World and they've been doing it for 11,000 years.
Yeah.
That seems to be the romantic part of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
The part that said to you, I don't care how much money I spent on this bottle, it's fabulous, right? So the bottle I saw in Vino was your first self-finish, or did you make wine from somebody else's grapes for the first couple?
Yes, that's what this is. So,
Areni?
Yeah. Yes, Areni from old vines, and it's quite nice.
It's like 6,000-year-old vines, like Noah's vines, or maybe even older than that. That's fascinating. Areni, at least when it came to what I've seen in SoCal, obviously a hotbed of wine and lots of brands there. And I just had this conversation with Vaya Kushkarian. I asked the question, can Areni make world-class wine? Can it do that? And are we there yet? He says, we're not there yet, but it can do it. Structurally, the grape, the skin, the acids, all the things it has going for it, but it takes many generations to do that. Are you consider yourself a steward of the land in this case, and that you're going to hand this off?
Oh yeah,
to the next group? And
yeah, and we're doing biodynamic farming there, so it's really the ultimate like stewardship. My partners in France are very deeply into it, and we've sort of drank the Kool-Aid along with them. So, yeah, it is very much about stewardship. And I mean, I'm sure most people realize that when you go into the wine business, you should have next generations to follow in your footsteps. I won't have my own, but I will definitely see that it gets passed on.
The question I have of in the Napa Valley, you can go buy, if you have enough money, you go buy that lifestyle and you can create things. You probably won't make any money, but you're not going to care because you have so much money to start with, right? So who cares? But, the old school families like the Corleys and the Barretts and those families that were there early on that paid for their land a long time ago can make money doing it. And I asked the question not that long ago to a winemaker here, and I said, are those days still available to anybody to buy a piece of land Sandra and I bought 60 acres in Paso Robles years ago, and we were going to plant it, but planting it was 4 times the cost of the land.
Right.
And we weren't willing to invest in that. So does that opportunity exist to build a brand around, a shelf price of, let's say, $20, and have margin in there?
I don't know. The cost of production here is pretty high,
Is it?
at least if you want to do it the right way with low production of
Yes.
your fields and everything. And I don't know. I mean, it's an odd economy because in a way, a lot of things here are relatively expensive. I think our challenge here is going to be that we have to make wines that are up to the price level that we're stuck with. Yeah.
But biodynamics not the least expensive way to do things.
Yeah, yeah.
But you chose that. Here's the irony, I think, of biodynamic and organic farming is that it always was at some point, right? I mean, the monks in Burgundy were obviously organic, maybe not biodynamic, but they were organic.
Yeah.
And up until maybe when post-war, when the Germans invented copper sulfate, the French, that pretty much natural, really. I mean, I hate that word, and then we invent all this stuff, and then we pull it away, and we go, look how great we are.
Right, exactly.
Which doesn't make any sense to me.
It's just going back in time, actually.
And it's exactly, and I don't think it's an excuse to create wines that taste like kombucha or something, because I think a lot of these brands taste like rustic. They don't need to taste rustic. They can still be very refined.
Yep.
So the Alsatian winemakers there, they came here and they thought this was pretty cool, huh?
They got really excited when they came here.
Really?
Yeah.
And how'd you find them in the first place?
Actually, they came. I think it's a father and 2 sons, and each father's the agronomist. One son is the winemaker, and the other is the marketing guy. And father came here on an exploratory trip that I think the government had organized, and maybe the French government was involved. He was here with a group. And I think he was the only one of the group that just said, wow, I got to do something here. Yeah, and then we got introduced to him, really had good chemistry, and yeah.
Well, Michel Roland has been here. Paul Hobbs has been here. There's some pretty amazing people consulting here. And I just, again, I go back to this idea. The Arenis I've tasted in California, they're okay. They're palatable wines. They're solid. But I'm wondering about their longevity. I'm wondering about their acid content. I'm wondering, and I guess only time will tell. But I think most people agree that it has the potential.
Yeah.
In 2006, you couldn't drink anything.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It was terrible.
Yeah, and the worst was like after independence, you had all these wines on the shelf, and occasionally you'd get a bottle that was really good, and you'd go back and buy a second one, and it was undrinkable.
Yeah.
They just had no quality control whatsoever. But now it's
I think the Soviets interrupted not only the cultural growth of the economy, because this place looks very European. I did a sizzle reel. I'm going to send it to you on the Azerbaijan soldiers taking the 4 wineries out of Artsakh, and Gautam Bagdasarian's a good friend of mine. I did the Kaprelian family. I haven't spoken to the other 2. And when I did that, I started to research, why wineries were a spoil of war. Why would this happen? And the Germans, the Prussians, destroyed vineyards as they went through France, but the Nazis, not only kept them, they stole all the wine.
Uh-huh.
And then by doing that, I started looking at videos of downtown Yerevan. I'm going, whoa, this is not the place that we visited in 2006.
Right.
And wine being part of this culture and the story behind it in Vino was fascinating to me, that we decided to do this. So what's your ultimate goal with it? You're going to have more than Areni? You're going to have Hangund and Voskahat and...
Yeah, we're planting, I think we've planted 5 or 6 grapes already. And I own about 36 hectares. It's actually on a
pretty
plateau.
good size.
Yeah, it is. And by the way, I never knew until we started planting like how big a hectare of vines is.
Yeah.
You sit around and you go, because the original plan was to start with 14 hectares. And when I saw it actually planted, I was like, "This really? It's like all that."
I have to walk all the way out there. I got
Yeah.
ATV, or
But I think as we go, I mean, I think we have 9 hectares of Areni, 2 of Voskahat, and 2 or 3 more of other grapes. And I think clearly as we do more planting, we're going to go into more grapes. And Vahip may have talked to you about he's been engaged in trying to recover old grapes that have sort of been lost or abandoned. And I'm sure that we have a lot of, genetic material here that's going to be really interesting to revive. Because I don't know, maybe, most of us, I think, believe in Armenian varietals. Mm-hmm. But some people are here planting foreign ones and doing really well at it. So,
well, we were at Armas. Victoria's a good friend.
Yeah.
And she said, yeah, some oligarch just bought a bunch of hectares next to her, and they're only planting French varietals. And so this is the business of wine, right? So I actually thought when we first came here in 2006 that Areni wasn't even a vitis vinifera grape because it was so bad. I thought it was just they're trying to make wine out of a non-wine grape.
Oh, gosh.
And that's not the case, obviously. Oh. I was surprised to read that it was.
Yeah.
But then the marketing of wine and the business of wine is a whole different part of the romance, and it's not romantic and it's very difficult. And so, French varietals, when you put Merlot on a bottle, it's probably going to be more attractive to most buyers than Areni.
Yeah.
But I will say there was a brand years ago that came through the office. I think it was Moldavian, something like that, Bulgarian Moldavian. It was a Merlot, so they put Merlot on the label, which is a very American thing to do. And it was called Hickory Ridge.
Yeah, really?
Because they wanted to name it something that Americans might. It didn't do well, but I always thought that was fabulous. So it sounds like, based on the expression, that, we're going to stick with the Armenian varietals. We're going to try and develop that worldwide, get people used to what we're doing.
Yeah, my whole reason to be here is not to make money in this country. I mean, I like to make money at what I do, but the main thing is it's cultural revival. It's revival of the nation, and that's our heritage. So, that's what I'm interested in.
So what do you think in the short term? There's, politically I don't want to peel that back too far. It's not a political show, but you have a lot of investment in all of this, and to see what's going on in the north, how the government's reacting to that. We have a chance to save all this and make sure it pursues, and I know the diaspora is behind it all.
Armenia?
Yes.
We're talking about Armenia.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm trying to dance around the subject without being too sensitive.
Well, I can just say, everybody here is constantly aware of the risks that we're facing. Okay. And if we, any day forget it, our neighbors will remind us of the risks the next day. So, when you're here and working and living in the environment, the first thing is part of the problem is you walk out onto the street every day and it feels so good here. It's hard to imagine that we're, under siege from our neighbors. So that's a real source of hope, because it's really the country's on a roll. The lifestyle couldn't be better. I have all kinds of friends who have moved here along with me from other places, and we all just think this is priceless, So,
that's what it takes.
Yeah,
that's what it takes. We were in the van yesterday with a woman who went through the same conversation, and the woman Miriam is the same. She came here, I think they opened 10 years ago, but she came as a teenager and she was complaining to her mother. And now she's like, life no other. And she came from Granada Hills.
Really, yeah.
Taj Mahal, right?
Yep.
It's fascinating because my brother-in-law Greg, has always pitched that idea. And my wife and I didn't see it the first time here, but we see it now. We understand this.
So you haven't been here since 2006?
No.
Oh, man. Well.
Now you sound like
I'm not going to point any fingers, but.
But you're going to anyway.
Yeah, but.
Well, we're and Connor wanted to come, and he hadn't seen him. I don't think Sarah had come here on my oldest daughter had come on a diverted Greek school thing. And then the Greek got, I guess there was some danger, so they diverted her here, and then she had an experience. I think it was 2010 or something. I don't remember that. But for sure, we'll be back. In fact, the other night we were at the Birdcage. You know this bar?
No, sorry.
Well, they might start pouring Tufenkian wine one day. So
Okay.
and I looked at Al Kabalov, my friend. I said, I don't feel like I'm in what was Armenia. I feel like I'm part of Europe. It could be in Paris. It could be anywhere.
No kidding.
Not that you want to emulate that.
Yeah.
But the question I had to a lot of people on the bus with us, I think I just said this, like, are we inspired to fix it, or are we resolved to think it's never going to change? And I think you can see that what you're doing is making it change.
Well,
how's the occupancy of the hotels, for instance?
Oh, well, it's one of the surprise benefits of the Ukraine invasion, you know.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, it's really been a boost for tourism here. Fortunately, I mean, until recently, the European tourism that stopped during COVID hadn't recovered, and we were really trying to understand it, but it seems like it's also growing back. So occupancy is good. Yeah, we're just wondering if and when the war ends, what it's going to mean, because a lot of probably half the guests here are Russian. So
They were in the elevator this morning.
Yeah.
But you can imagine that if somebody comes, experiences this, realizes this is the playground of sorts, a different culture that they're not used to, that they'll come back.
Absolutely, and interestingly, I met a group of Jewish emigres from Russia who had come here last week, and one of them, the leader of the group, said, I came from Russia, I landed here, I got my papers to go to Israel, and I went to Israel, and I went to some European country, and I said, I want to come back to Armenia. This is the best lifestyle I can find.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
And they all felt that way. So I can't say it's true for every Russian that's here, but it really, I mean, you can imagine, in a country where you've got the government breathing down your neck every day in Russia, that you come here, whatever else you can complain about here, you are really free to say what you want, to do what you want within the laws. It's a very light existence. Yeah.
Very Western concept.
Very, very, exactly.
So what do we do with all these empty Soviet buildings that are just dying on the vine out there, and to change the countryside, change the drive? And that was prompted the question I asked you, but I mean, looked like a tale of two cities there.
Oh, yeah. You mean in the regions?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. A friend of mine years ago had the idea that they should have like a works WPA project here
right.
to put people to work tearing down ugly stuff.
Yeah, no. I mean, right, because you drive out there and we're going, wow, we went to the other direction to a camp, a youth camp, not like the Nazi youth camp. But
Good, not here.
And fascinated by some of the modern construction and the quality and the fit and fish, the Western fit and finish, and then next to, this burned out building, so to speak.
Yeah, it's a bit of a problem. I mean, of course, the hope is that these things will get repurposed to the extent that they're soundly constructed. But yeah.
So back to the wine thing for a second. You brought up something with Vahe that I think was very important, and that is, I read this book called, I think, Medieval Wine in the Medieval Armenia. It goes way back.
Huh.
It's got probably 100 different varietals listed and pictures of them.
Right.
And I'm fascinated by the Italian varietals, particularly the whites. I think it's one of the best wines in the world as far as white wine's concerned. And a lot of that's going on in Umbria, where they're finding odd vines and they're resurrecting the DNA of these interesting varietals and modeling them. And they're really quite good, complex, interesting. How's this thing going? And are you aware of what Vahe Kuzgarin has been doing with them? And have we found anything?
Yeah, I mean, constantly finding. I mean, the concept, you can imagine, it's really intriguing and exciting, this idea of rediscovering. Because like you said, when there were 100 varietals at that time, there must be some of them that are just spectacular and different. And, so it's kind of like the attraction of detective work. You want to get in there and dig around and see what there is. So I don't know. I'm not up on Vahe's work lately. I know other people have taken up the same thing. I mean, they're, again, among those of us who really want to help revive Armenian winemaking. There's definitely an interest in finding new grapes. I mean, we've already been exploring ones that are already planted. They're not, because apparently there are people who have small plots around the country that are from I don't know how long ago, and they don't even know what the grape is, but it's something different. Wow. And yeah,
that's very cool.
Yeah, it is.
That's very cool because the concept of what goes together. The concept of natural selection of grapes, particularly Vitis vinifera, in various regions of the world, for a reason. My brother-in-law insists that we bring Areni to Napa Valley, and in the wine business, you don't typically do that. You run some
especially
tests.
When nobody's heard of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you try to determine whether it's a good fit. You're talking about altitudes, very important in the wine world. In Malbec, I talked about this earlier with Vahe, but they're experimenting with Malbec at like 5,000 feet, and
wow.
they're coming up with some pretty interesting wines. And there's one brand from a French family, Arnaud. 1,000 feet, 2,000, 3,000, 5,000
feet.
So they're bottling each level separately. And the wines are different, considerably different.
Yeah.
Structurally different, and the character's different. It's really fascinating to watch. And I always wonder what the end game is. Like I ask a lot of winemakers, what is the end game? You're trying to produce the best thing you can based on what you've got, or are you trying to express this district best you can? What is the end game?
Good question.
As to all the refinement and all this clonal selection and I think, and Vahe and I kind of came with the conclusion that it really is, and I got this word, I haven't used this word, and I got it from a Bulgarian psalm, and she's used the word typicity. And I don't mean typicity in the it's typical of. I mean typicity in that it's representative of, that it's representing where your vineyards are. And you can take your bottle of Tufenkian and bring it to LA and put it on the table and say, this is who I am. This is what I was.
Wow.
And I think that's the end game. Or you just want to make as much money as you can. No kidding. I know
Not
you already
me.
said that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, I think it's part of this unexplainable attraction of wine. You're just always in pursuit of something, and it feels great when you find it, even though it doesn't necessarily translate into dollars.
It won't.
Yeah, it won't. Right.
But it's, and you just nailed it on the head. The question I've asked many winemakers, and I don't get a direct answer because there isn't one. But what is it about wine? You don't feel like this when you drink bourbon. You don't feel, people chase scotches and things, but you don't feel this way. You don't feel this way about beer. And in fact, beer, the brewmaster's job is to make sure it tastes the same.
Yeah.
But wine makes you think somehow.
I wonder if it's partly, I was out in Napa and Sonoma last year, a couple of years ago, with your brother-in-law.
Greg told me. He asked me for stuff, I remember.
I had a day with a winemaker and in a small vineyard, and we were talking about it. And I'm still really new to wine, so it was the first time that I understood how many different variables there are that go into making a wine what it is. And I mean, they're like thousands. And they were telling me, they were saying we all really cooperate with each other out here. We don't mind giving away our secrets and whatever. And I did some questioning, and I understood that part of the reason why they're not possessive is that there's so many variables. He can tell the guy next to him exactly what he's doing, and that guy's going to come up with a different product. And so I think that's part of the fascination of wine, is dealing with this infinite variety of variables. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the permutations are endless.
Exactly.
And so do we have that here? Do we have that in Armenia where you're sharing these secrets and sharing these methodologies? And do we have enough of them to understand the differences?
I think there's a community here that does share a lot. Yeah. I think my winemaker and some of her contemporaries are pretty open with each other.
Wait a minute. Did you say her?
Of course.
Wow. This is a big subject.
I always hire women if I can in this country.
Well, I don't blame you. Especially some of the women we've seen around here. But no, I'm being sarcastic because women in wine is a huge subject right now.
Oh, really?
A lot of wonderful winemakers on my show recently that were women.
Yeah.
And in America, the idea of a female winemaker is rather prevalent, and there's, I think, 25% of the winemakers in California are women.
Whoa.
Now the energy's put in executive roles. Now, small wineries don't have executive roles. Sometimes a winemaker is the executive. But they're trying to now get the population at the higher levels of management of a winery to be women as well. But that's really fascinating. That A, she's Alsatian, and B, it's a woman.
No, she's Armenian.
Oh, she's Armenian.
Yeah. The
consultants are
That's right,
Alsatian.
exactly. Yeah.
Wow, where does she get educated?
Partly here and partly in Germany.
Really?
Yeah.
And her whole the fascination was to do what you're doing, get the industry.
I don't know how she came to it because she was a an HR specialist before that.
Of course.
And I don't know,
Everybody knows
something.
this.
But she went to EVN Academy here and got her basic training, and I guess she really got hooked.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I'm very proud. I had an intern, Lisa Kasabian. She came during the last summer, and she did most of my talking point notes for upcoming podcasts, and she got so intrigued by the women that she heard speak that she applied to Cornell and Davis Enology School, and she got accepted to both.
Oh, really?
And so she's going to Cornell this semester to study wine.
She's from States or from here?
Yeah, she's
from States.
Glendale.
Yeah.
The valley. So, we're going to be kicked out of here soon.
Yeah.
Well, it's 12:30. It's already been 45 minutes. What a great opportunity to meet you and discuss what you're thinking and doing, and the face behind the legend, behind the carpets, behind the wine now. Such a joy to meet you.
Yeah, me too, Paul.
I'm glad you're on the show, and we're going to do it again when we come back out, because we will be coming back out.
In next month, right?
So, we're headed to Paris after this, and we're going to have dinner with the Kladstrups. The Kladstrups is a fascinating couple who wrote the book Wine and War that I found during my research for the Azerbaijan War.
Wow.
And the wineries. And boy, when they're talking about the Nazis and what they did, and Hitler had like 100,000 bottles in his cellar. He didn't even drink, but it was the spoil of war, and I thought that was a fascinating conversation. But look forward to spending more time with you soon.
Thanks, Paul. It's a pleasure.
Cheers. Thank you for listening to Wine Talks with Paul Kalamkarian. Don't forget to subscribe, because there's more great interviews on their way. Folks, have a great time out there in the wine world. Cheers.